We shall commence this module by discussing about exchange rate. The exchange rate is one of the most fundamental concepts of international economics as it greatly impacts the export and import demands in an open economy, an economy that trades with other economies across the globe. Often, newspaper headlines inform us about the fall of rupee against the dollar and the reaction of Dr. Raghuram Rajan, the present RBI governor, as well as other renowned economists on this phenomena. Here, we try to understand how the exchange rate between any two currencies is determined through a simple demand-supply approach as well as through the assets market approach. Exchange rate allows us to compare the prices of goods and services produced in various countries. The price of an iPhone 6 in the US is $299, whereas in India it is rupees 52,000 approx. In order to compare the price of the same or different product in two different countries, we need to know the exchange rate, that is the relative price of dollar to rupee. If currently the exchange rate is 62 rupees per dollar, the price of the iPhone in terms of the rupee in the US will be $299 into 62 rupees per dollar, which is equal to rupees 18,538. After starting this module, you shall be able to understand how the exchange rate is determined, know the demand approach of exchange rate, know the monetary approach of exchange rate determination, know the asset market approach. Let us first discuss some important terms. Exchange rate. The price of one currency in terms of any other currency is known as the exchange rate. A flexible exchange rate system is a monetary system that allows the exchange rate to be determined by supply and demand. A fixed exchange rate is a type of exchange rate regime where a currency's value is fixed against either the value of another single currency to a basket of other currencies or to another measure of value such as gold. A country can decide whether to adopt a flexible, fixed or some other approach which is in between the two extremes. Appreciation. Increase in the value of a currency. Flexible exchange rate. Depreciation. Decrease in the value of a currency. Flexible exchange rate. There are many theories that help to determine the exchange rate between any two currencies. We briefly discuss the triple P theory, demand supply approach and asset market approach. Purchasing power parity theory. The purchasing power parity triple P theory starts with the law of one price, which states that price of an asset or commodity will be the same when exchange rates are taken into consideration. This is due to the existence of arbitrage opportunities. If the price of a good was not the same in two different markets, an arbitrator can purchase the asset in the cheaper market and sell it in the higher market. Similarly, a dollar will be able to buy the same amount of goods anywhere in the world. If not, then substitution will cause the exchange rates and or prices to change to equalize the purchasing power. Suppose, for example, that a dollar purchased more goods in Europe than in the United States. The resulting high demand for the euro and European goods will cause the price of the euro to increase and the price of European goods to increase and the price of US goods to decrease until the purchasing power of the dollar was the same in both Europe and the US. Triple P theory states that price differentials are not sustainable in the long run as market forces will equalize prices among countries and change exchange rates in doing so. If P star is the price of a commodity in Europe in euros and R is the dollar cost of the euro, dollar per euro, then the dollar cost of gold in Europe is P star into R. The dollar cost of gold in the US, P must equal this. If it is differed, say P is greater than P into R, then gold would be purchased in Europe and sold in the US, causing P to fall and both P star and R to increase until there was equality. Thus, the law of one price states that P is equal to P star into R or R is equal to P upon P star. Extending to all goods whose prices are measured by price indices, then we have absolute triple P, that is R is equal to P upon P star. There are two main problems with triple P. Firstly, triple P take only the market for goods. The exchange rate is influenced not only by the supply and demand for goods but also by movements of capital. The exchange rate will change with respect to increased or reduced demand for foreign assets and not essentially reflect just relative goods prices. The second problem is transportation cost and non-traded goods. Some goods are so expensive to transport, for example land and houses, that they are not traded internationally. Others are traded but prices will differ by the cost of transportation. Relative triple P recognizes that R may differ from P upon P star due to the above concerns. But if the difference between R and P upon P star is relatively constant, then changes in R should reflect changes in P and P star. Stated algebraically, percentage change R is equal to percentage change P minus percentage change P star. Now, we shall learn the determination of exchange rate with help of demand supply approach. The demand supply model of exchange rate determination implies that the equilibrium exchange rate changes when the factors that affect the demand and supply conditions change. The demand supply framework allows you to forecast the next period's exchange rate. When you understand this framework, you will be able to predict the direction of the change in the exchange rates. In other words, whether a currency will depreciate or appreciate against another currency. If the exchange rate is stated as the dollar-euro rate, it tells you how many dollars to give up to buy 1 euro. Therefore, this exchange rate implies the price of a euro in dollars. Who are these people that want to buy or sell dollars or any other currency? They are international banks, multinational companies, speculators and so on. Whenever they want to buy dollars, they will be along the demand curve. Whenever they want to supply dollars, they will be along the supply curve. Factors that affect demand and supply are related to the macroeconomic fundamentals of two countries represented in the exchange rate. Because the example exchange rate is the euro-dollar rate, the following variables may change in the US or the eurozone, which then have an effect on the euro-dollar exchange rate: inflation rate, interest rate, growth rate, speculation and lastly government restrictions. Factors influence the exchange rate. Inflation rate. Countries where inflation rates are lower generally see exchange rates appreciating in value, which happens because of the fact that when inflation rate is lower, demand for country's currency increases and hence it becomes more competitive with respect to other countries which have relatively high inflation rates. Next is interest rate. Countries where interest rates are higher generally see exchange rates appreciating in value, which again happens because when interest rates are higher, money flow into the country, also known as hot money flows. Demand for country's currency increases and hence it becomes more competitive with respect to other countries. Next is growth rate. Generally, it is seen when the country is growing at a higher rate, then it sees value of its country increasing, but in case of a recession, currency is depreciated, though the overall effect will depend on several other factors. Next is speculation. Speculation works in a way which leads to increase or decrease in the value of a currency depending upon different situations. Suppose if market players anticipate the value of currency to increase in coming times, then they will demand more of that currency, with which the value of currency will appreciate and vice versa. And somewhat similar would be the case if people anticipate interest rate of a particular currency to increase. Next, government intervention. Sometimes it is seen government tends to impact their currency. For instance, if China keeps its currency at low level, then its export will become competitive. Currency could be influenced by government in many ways, like buying of US dollar assets. Next, moving on to the monetary approach. The monetary approach to the balance of payments developed in the early 1960s recognizes that the balance of payments can be viewed not only as the sum of its constituent parts, for example goods, services, financial capital, etc., but also as the movement of money internationally. A balance of payments deficit means that net money flows out of a country, and a balance of payment surplus means net money flows into a country. A deficit implies that the demand for money in the domestic market is less than the supply of money in the domestic market. This excess supply of domestic money means that money will flow out of the country, a deficit. A surplus implies excess domestic money demand. Domestic money demand exceeds domestic money supply, which domestics try to satisfy by producing an inflow of money, a surplus. More formally, suppose that the amount of money demanded is some stable fraction of nominal GDP. MD is equal to K in bracket PY, where MD is money demand, P is the domestic price level, Y is real GDP, PY is nominal GDP, and K is the fraction of nominal GDP that domestics want to hold in money balances. The supply of money is determined by the product of the monetary base and the money multiplier, that is MS is equal to MB, where MS is the money supply, small m is the money multiplier, and B is the monetary base. The monetary base can be changed by the domestic authorities through the use of monetary tools such as open market operations. In a fixed exchange rate system, a country's monetary authority agrees to buy its currency if its value threatens to fall and sell its currency if its value threatens to increase. If the monetary authority buys its own currency, retiring it, so to speak, then the monetary base is reduced and the domestic money supply is decreased. If the monetary authorities sell its own currency, then the monetary base is increased and domestic money supply is increased. In equilibrium, money supply equals money demand, or MD is equal to MS. Let us say there is an increment in the money supply via open market operation with no modification in demand for money domestically. This excess domestic money supply in the domestic market will move outside countries' boundaries, leading to deficit situation in BOP. The downward pressure on the exchange rate of country will start buying country's currency by monetary authorities, which leads to reduction in the supply of money domestically. Although the initial open market operation shoot up supply of money, the interventionist policy to keep the exchange rate has declined supply of money by the like amount. The mechanics can be driven in reverse if there is decrease in supply of money domestically with no corresponding modification in the money demand domestically would cause an extra money demand domestically, which would be satisfied by domestic selling net goods, services and assets abroad. The threatened increase in the value of the exchange rate would be starting selling of domestic currency by the concerned monetary authorities, which pushes up supply of money domestically. In a fixed system of exchange rate, a country cannot control its money supply. The supply of money in an automatic manner modifies to eliminate any imbalance in the BOP with imbalances, deficits and surpluses of BOP caused by excess supply or demand of money. In a flexible system of exchange rate, the commitment to buy or sell its own currency by monetary authorities for maintenance of exchange rate is not there. So, supply of money can be controlled by it. The adjustment to balance of payment surpluses and deficits in a flexible exchange rate system occurs through the effect of exchange rate changes on domestic prices. Further, we discuss the asset market approach. The asset market approach is based majorly on the interest parity condition. Interest rate parity holds when the rate of return on one currency is equal to another. We take for example US dollar deposit and British pounds. ROR in dollars is equal to ROR in pounds. The object of saving is basically to transfer present consumption to the future. Rate of return refers to the increase in value an asset offers over time. However, we often cannot say with certainty what will happen over time, while the decision to buy an asset must be made in the present. Hence, we make use of an estimate known as the expected rate of return. To calculate an expected rate of return over some time period, you make your best forecast of the asset's total value at the period's end. The percentage difference between that expected future value and the price you pay for the asset today equals the asset's expected rate of return over the time period. In the foreign exchange market, investors base their demands for deposits of different currencies on a comparison of these assets' expected rates of return. For comparing return rate on various kinds of deposits, first they need to know how the money value of the deposits will change. Second, they need to know how exchange rates will change so that they can translate rates of return measured in different currencies into comparable terms. Interest rate is the first component of the rate of return calculation. Deposits pay interest because they are really loans from the depositor to the bank. When a corporation or a financial institution deposits a currency in a bank, it is lending that currency to the bank rather than using it for some current expenditure. In other words, the depositor is acquiring an asset denominated in the currency it deposits. For example, if you deposit $10,000 in a bank and the rate of interest is 10%, the interest earned will be 10% of 10,000, that is $1,000. This is the return on deposit of $10,000 in the bank. If the interest rate increases, the return on asset will also increase. This in turn will encourage people to save more. Small I is equal to small I star plus EA. EA is the expected appreciation of foreign currency. Small I is the domestic interest rate on bonds. Small I star is the foreign interest rate on bonds. Given interest rates, EA must be some number. If the domestic interest rate is 8% and the foreign interest rate is 5%, then EA must be 3%. If EA now increases to 4%, then the return on foreign investment is 9%. That is small I star plus EA. This will cause a flow of funds to the foreign market, causing an immediate appreciation of the exchange rate SR, which will restore EA to 3%. Thus, the exchange will appreciate by 1%, exactly equal to the change in expectations. The assumption in the monetary approach that uncovered interest parity applies is equivalent to the assumption that investors care only about the rate of return. Thus, foreign currency is not seen as riskier than domestic currency. The portfolio balance approach, also called the asset market approach to exchange rates, views money as just one asset of many and views the exchange rate as that which equates the supply and demand for assets. In the portfolio balance approach, domestic and foreign assets are not actually what we call perfect substitutes due to the currency risk associated with foreign assets and the chance of coming across a risk of high default. Risk attached with this leads to non-existence of uncovered interest parity because of the premium of risk. If the risk premium RP is a percentage unit on foreign assets, then a percentage would be lessened from the return that we get on foreign assets while calculating the net return rate. So, small I is equal to small I star plus EA minus RP. In the portfolio balance approach, every owner of wealth allocates wealth in some way between domestic money, foreign bonds and domestic bonds. Money will be kept for smoothing the transaction process, but there is a cost to do so in the form of foregone interest that could be earned on bonds. Thus, wealth will be balanced between money for transactions and bonds for the interest payments. Some of those bonds may be foreign bonds due to a higher return and due to possible diversification benefits. If the return on one asset falls, then there is some probability that the return on the other asset will increase, offsetting that loss. Thus, an asset with a lower return can still be valuable if there are significant diversification benefits. The divide between money, foreign bonds, domestic bonds is dependent on wealth, foreign currencies expected appreciation or depreciation, relative interest rates and the premium of risk. A change in any of these factors will cause a portfolio reallocation, and to the degree that foreign bond sales change, the exchange rate will change. In the portfolio balance approach, equilibrium occurs when the market for each asset, money, domestic bonds and foreign bonds is in equilibrium. Since money, foreign bonds, domestic bonds can be substituted between each other, if any of the market goes through disturbance, then market is affected. For example, if real domestic income increases, then the demand for money will increase in order to conduct a higher volume of real transactions. Given the money supply, the increased desire for money balances will come from sales of domestic and foreign bonds. The sale of foreign bonds in order to buy domestic currency will cause a depreciation of the foreign currency. Obviously, the mechanism is much more complex than this because a modification in Y could generate price change, interest rates change and other variables change that can impact demand of assets. The significant aspect of the portfolio approach is that it focuses attention on the relationship between all the sectors of the economy. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. The price of one currency in terms of any other currency is known as the exchange rate. The purchasing power parity PPP theory states with the law of one price, which states that the price of an asset or commodity will be the same when exchange rates are taken into consideration. The demand supply model of exchange rate determination implies that the equilibrium exchange rate changes when the factors that affect the demand and supply conditions change. The demand supply framework enables you to predict the next period's exchange rate. Factors affecting exchange rate are inflation rate, interest rate, growth rate and speculation and government restrictions. The monetary approach to the balance of payments recognizes that the balance of payments can be viewed not only as the sum of its constituent parts, for example, goods, services, financial capital, etc., but also as the movement of money internationally. The asset market approach is based majorly on the interest parity condition. Interest rate parity holds when the rate of return on one currency is equal to another.